Have you ever practiced an IELTS speaking answer perfectly at home, but when the examiner asked you a question, your mind suddenly went completely blank?
Oh, wow. That's exactly what happened to me once. I knew the answer. I had practiced it before, but during the test, I just froze.
And you're definitely not alone. Thousands of IELTS students experience the same thing. They spend weeks learning vocabulary, watching YouTube videos, taking mock tests, and then the speaking test starts, and suddenly they can't think of anything to say.
It's such a strange feeling. It's like your brain decides to stop working at the worst possible moment.
Exactly. And that's what we're talking about today.
This sounds important because I think many students believe freezing means their English isn't good enough.
That's one of the biggest misunderstandings. In many cases, students don't freeze because of poor English. They freeze because of pressure, fear, overthinking, or simply because they're trying too hard to sound perfect.
That's interesting. I always thought freezing was only a language problem.
Not at all. In fact, even people who speak English quite well can suddenly struggle during an IELTS speaking test.
Really?
Absolutely. Imagine someone asks you a simple question, like, what's your favorite season?
Easy. I can answer that right now.
Exactly. But if someone tells you that your future depends on your answer and starts timing you, suddenly that simple question feels much harder.
That's true. The pressure changes everything.
It does. And that's why today's episode is so important. We're going to explore the real reasons students freeze during IELTS speaking, and more importantly, how to stop it from happening. I think a lot of listeners are going to relate to this topic.
Definitely. But before we continue, welcome back to English Chat Studio.
The place where we help you improve your English naturally and prepare for IELTS with more confidence.
If you're enjoying these IELTS conversations and finding them useful, we'd really appreciate your support. Please take a second to like this episode, subscribe to English Chat Studio, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new podcast.
Every week, we're sharing practical IELTS advice, speaking tips, study strategies, and real solutions to problems students face every day.
Now, let's talk about something many learners don't like to admit.
What's that?
Sometimes students freeze before the speaking test even begins.
Before it begins?
Yes, they walk into the room already expecting failure.
Wow, I never thought about that.
Their inner voice says things like, "My English isn't good enough. I'm going to make mistakes. The examiner will think I'm weak."
And those thoughts keep growing.
Exactly. By the time the first question arrives, they're already nervous and distracted.
So they're fighting their own thoughts instead of focusing on the conversation.
That's right. IELTS speaking is not just an English test. It's also a communication test. The examiner wants to hear your ideas, your experiences, and your ability to keep a conversation going.
But many students treat it like a memory test.
That's another great point. Students often try to memorize answers word for word. Then, when the actual question is slightly different, panic starts.
Because their prepared answer no longer fits.
Exactly. And once panic appears, freezing becomes much more likely.
So the problem is often bigger than vocabulary or grammar.
Much bigger. And the good news is that most of these problems can be fixed.
That's encouraging, because freezing feels scary when it happens.
It does. But today, we're going to break it down step by step and show listeners how they can stay calm and keep speaking naturally.
And I have a feeling some of the reasons might surprise people.
They definitely will. Because in the next part, we're going to discuss the most common mistakes IELTS beginners make that actually cause them to freeze during the speaking test without even realizing it.
And some of those mistakes start long before test day.
Exactly. So stay with us, because the next part could completely change the way you prepare for IELTS speaking. So, in the first part, we talked about how freezing isn't always caused by weak English. But what are the biggest mistakes that actually lead to it? Great question. And honestly, the first mistake surprises a lot of students.
Now I'm curious.
Students spend more time collecting study materials than actually speaking.
Ouch. That sounds familiar.
Think about it. Many learners have folders full of PDFs, saved YouTube playlists, vocabulary notebooks, and dozens of IELTS tips.
But they rarely open their mouth and speak.
Exactly. Speaking is a skill. You can't develop it by only reading about it.
It's like watching cooking videos every day, but never entering the kitchen.
Perfect comparison. Then test day arrives, and students expect themselves to speak smoothly under pressure.
And their brain says, "We've never practiced this for real."
That's right.
What's another mistake?
Trying to sound smarter than they actually need to.
Oh, that's interesting.
Students often believe IELTS examiners want complicated English all the time.
So they try to use difficult vocabulary in every sentence.
Exactly. Imagine a student normally says, "I enjoy spending time with my family."
Simple and natural.
But during the test, they suddenly try to say something like, "I derive immense satisfaction from engaging in familial interactions."
That doesn't even sound like a real person talking.
And while trying to remember those complicated words, they lose their train of thought.
I've done that before. I was so focused on vocabulary that I forgot what I wanted to say.
And that's incredibly common. What else causes students to freeze? Comparing themselves to other people.
That's a big one.
A student watches someone online speaking fluent English with a British or American accent and immediately feels discouraged.
They start thinking, "I'll never sound like that."
Exactly. Then they enter the speaking test carrying that insecurity with them.
Instead of focusing on communication, they're worrying about sounding perfect.
And perfection is one of the biggest enemies of fluency.
That's such a powerful sentence.
Because real communication isn't perfect. Even native speakers pause, restart sentences, and search for words sometimes.
But IELTS students often think every sentence must be flawless.
Which creates unnecessary pressure.
I think another mistake is overthinking every question.
Absolutely. Let me give you an example.
Go ahead.
The examiner asks, "Do you enjoy mornings?"
Seems simple enough.
One student answers immediately. "Yes, I do. I usually feel more productive in the morning because my mind is fresh."
Nice and natural.
Another student spends 10 seconds thinking about grammar, vocabulary, sentence structure, and pronunciation.
Meanwhile, panic starts growing.
Exactly. The question wasn't difficult. The student made it difficult.
That sounds so real.
Here's another hidden problem. Many students are afraid of silence.
What do you mean?
They believe one short pause means disaster.
So if they stop for a second, they panic?
Yes. Then, instead of continuing naturally, they become focused on the pause itself.
Which makes them even more nervous.
Exactly. A 1-second pause becomes a 5-second freeze.
It's almost like a snowball effect.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
Listening to all this, I'm realizing that freezing often starts long before the actual moment when a student goes blank.
That's true. The freeze is usually the result of habits, fears, and preparation mistakes that have been building for weeks or months.
So if we can fix those habits, we can reduce the chances of freezing.
Definitely. And the good news is that the solutions are much simpler than many students think.
I like the sound of that.
Because in the next part, we're going to focus on practical strategies, not theory, not motivation. Real things you can start doing this week to feel calmer and more confident when speaking English.
Including what to do if your mind suddenly goes blank during practice?
Exactly. We'll talk about that, plus several simple techniques that strong IELTS candidates use to keep a conversation moving, even when they don't know the perfect answer.
That sounds incredibly useful.
So stay with us, because the next part might completely change the way you practice IELTS speaking. In the last part, we talked about the mistakes that make students freeze. Now I'm wondering, what should someone actually do to stop it from happening? The good news is that this problem is usually fixable. Most students think they need more vocabulary or more grammar, but often they simply need better speaking habits.
Better habits sound much easier than memorizing hundreds of new words.
Exactly. Let's start with the first strategy.
I'm ready.
Stop preparing answers. Start preparing ideas.
What's the difference?
Many students write complete answers for common IELTS questions and try to memorize them.
Which sounds helpful at first.
It does. But real speaking isn't about remembering scripts. It's about expressing ideas naturally.
So instead of memorizing an answer about my hometown, I should think about different things I can say about it?
Exactly. Think about places, people, food, memories, transportation, weather, or anything connected to your hometown.
That sounds much more flexible.
And flexibility reduces panic because you're not trying to remember exact sentences.
I like that approach.
The second strategy is something most students ignore.
Which is?
Practice speaking when you're slightly uncomfortable.
That sounds difficult already.
Let me explain. Many learners only practice alone in their room.
That's true. It feels safe.
But IELTS won't happen in your bedroom. You'll be speaking to another person.
So we need practice that feels more realistic?
Exactly. Speak with a friend. Join an online speaking group. Record yourself answering questions while a timer is running.
Because that small amount of pressure helps you adapt?
Right. Then the real exam doesn't feel completely unfamiliar.
What's strategy number 3?
Learn how to keep talking even when you don't know the perfect answer.
I think that's where many students struggle.
Let's imagine the examiner asks, "What kind of music do you enjoy?"
Okay.
And maybe you don't have an interesting answer immediately.
That's happened to me before.
Instead of freezing, you can think aloud naturally.
What do you mean?
You might say, "That's an interesting question. I don't listen to music every day, but when I do, I usually choose something relaxing."
So you're giving yourself time while still speaking.
Exactly. The conversation continues. The examiner hears fluency instead of silence.
That's such a useful technique.
And it's completely natural. Native speakers do it all the time.
What's next?
Strategy number 4, make friends with simple English.
I feel like many students need to hear this.
Absolutely. Some learners spend so much energy searching for impressive words that they forget communication is the goal.
So simple doesn't mean bad.
Not at all. Imagine two students answering the same question.
Okay.
One student uses very advanced vocabulary, but struggles, pauses constantly, and loses confidence.
And the other?
The other student uses clear, simple language and speaks comfortably for the entire answer.
the second student sounds much stronger.
Exactly. Fluency often creates a better impression than forced complexity.
That's reassuring.
Here's another strategy that many students overlook.
I'm listening.
Practice recovering from mistakes.
Recovering.
Yes, during practice, don't stop every time you make an error.
That's exactly what I used to do.
Most learners do. They make one grammar mistake and immediately restart the entire answer.
Which doesn't happen in a real speaking test.
Correct. In the exam, you simply continue.
So during practice, we should train ourselves to keep moving forward?
Exactly. Mistakes become much less scary when you stop treating them like disasters.
I think that mindset alone could help many students.
Definitely. Because confidence isn't built by being perfect. It's built by learning how to continue when things aren't perfect.
That's a really powerful idea.
And now comes the fun part.
What are we doing next?
In the next section, we're going to put these strategies into action using realistic IELTS speaking situations.
So we'll see how a student freezes, what goes wrong, and how to respond more naturally?
Exactly. We'll compare weak responses with stronger ones and show listeners what fluent communication actually sounds like.
I think that's where everything will start to click.
I agree. So don't go anywhere, because in the next part, we're moving from theory to real IELTS speaking examples that you can use immediately in your own practice. We've talked about why students freeze and how to reduce it, but I think many listeners are wondering what freezing actually looks like in a real IELTS test. That's a great point, because freezing doesn't always mean complete silence.
Really?
Not always. Sometimes students are speaking, but they're mentally stuck.
I never thought about it that way.
Let me give you an example. Imagine the examiner asks, "Would you like to live in another country in the future?"
That's a pretty common IELTS style question.
Right. Now, imagine a student immediately starts thinking, which grammar tense should I use? Should I use advanced vocabulary? What's the perfect answer? How long should I speak?
So instead of answering the question, they're having a private meeting inside their own head.
Exactly. And while all that thinking is happening, communication stops.
That's surprisingly relatable.
Here's what strong candidates often do differently. They simply start with the first honest idea that comes to mind.
Even if it isn't a brilliant idea?
Especially if it isn't. They might say, "Yes, I think I would. I've always been interested in experiencing a different culture, and I think living abroad would help me grow as a person."
That's actually very simple.
And that's why it works. The answer moves forward naturally.
I think students often underestimate how powerful simple ideas can be.
Absolutely. Let's look at another situation. Imagine the examiner asks, "What do you usually do on weekends?"
That sounds easy.
It does. But some students immediately think, "My weekends are boring."
And then they panic because they think boring means bad English.
Exactly. They believe they need an exciting story. Maybe they think everyone else is traveling, skydiving, or climbing mountains every weekend,
Meanwhile, they're just relaxing at home.
which is completely normal and actually much easier to talk about.
That's true.
A student might say, "Most weekends are fairly quiet for me. I usually catch up on sleep, watch a few videos online, and spend time with my family."
That's a real answer.
Exactly. IELTS is not a competition for the most interesting life.
That's a sentence many students need to hear.
The examiner isn't judging your lifestyle. They're listening to your communication skills.
That's a huge difference.
Here's another example. Imagine the examiner asks something unexpected. Maybe, "What's a skill you'd like to learn in the future?"
Okay.
Suddenly, the student can't think of anything.
That's happened to me before.
And many students believe they must answer instantly.
Which creates even more pressure.
Exactly. But natural speakers often buy themselves a little thinking time.
How?
They might say, "That's an interesting question. I've never really thought about it before."
That already feels more relaxed.
Then their brain gets a few extra seconds to generate ideas.
And the conversation keeps moving.
Exactly. Now, let's talk about something that happens during part 2.
The cue card section?
Yes. Many students are doing well for 30 or 40 seconds, then suddenly they forget what they plan to say.
That's probably the most stressful moments in the entire speaking test.
It feels stressful, but here's the interesting part. Most candidates think the examiner notices every small problem.
Doesn't the examiner notice?
Not nearly as much as students imagine. When a student loses a point and calmly continues, the conversation often feels much smoother than they think.
So the student is panicking internally, but externally, everything still looks okay.
Exactly. The real danger comes when the student stops completely because they're trying to remember the perfect next sentence.
So movement is better than perfection?
Almost always.
You know what's interesting?
What?
Every example we've discussed today has one thing in common.
Go on.
The successful student focuses on communicating. The struggling student focuses on performing.
That's probably the best summary of IELTS speaking I've heard in a long time.
Because communication feels natural. Performance feels stressful.
Exactly. And when students understand that difference, their speaking often improves immediately.
But even if someone understands all these strategies, fear can still appear on test day.
Definitely. Knowing what to do and staying calm enough to do it are two different things.
Which brings us to something many students quietly struggle with:
Confidence.
confidence, self-doubt, nervousness, and all those thoughts that show up right before the speaking test begins.
Exactly. And in the next part, we're going to have an honest conversation about the mental side of IELTS speaking and why confidence is often built in a very different way than students expect.
You know, something keeps coming to my mind while we've been talking.
What's that?
Most students think confidence comes first. They think, once I become confident, then I'll speak better.
That's interesting because I actually think it's the opposite.
Really?
Confidence usually comes after action, not before it.
Explain that.
Imagine someone who has never ridden a bicycle. Would you expect them to feel confident before they start riding?
Probably not.
Confidence grows after small successes, after they ride for a few minutes, after they stop falling, after they realize they can do it.
So confidence is built through experience.
Exactly. And IELTS speaking works the same way. Many students are waiting to feel confident before they start speaking regularly.
But confidence is something they develop by speaking regularly.
That's right.
I think social media makes this harder.
How so?
We often see polished versions of people. A student watches someone speaking fluent English online and thinks, I could never do that.
That's a very common trap. What they don't see are the years of practice behind that fluency.
They only see the final result.
Exactly. It's like watching the last scene of a movie without seeing everything that happened before it.
That's such a good way to put it.
Here's something I've noticed. Many students are far better at English than they think.
Really?
Absolutely. Sometimes I'll ask a student a simple question before a lesson. Maybe something like, "How was your day?" They answer naturally for a minute or two without any problem.
Then what happens?
The moment I say, Let's do an IELTS speaking question. Everything changes.
Suddenly they become nervous.
Exactly. Same student, same English level, same person, but a completely different mindset.
That's fascinating.
Because often the problem isn't ability, it's pressure.
So students need to stop treating every speaking practice session like a final exam?
Exactly. Not every conversation needs a score. Not every answer needs analysis. Sometimes you just need to talk.
I think that takes a lot of pressure off.
It really does. And here's another thing students rarely talk about: bad speaking days.
Oh, yes. Those days when everything feels difficult.
Exactly. One day you're speaking smoothly. The next day, you're forgetting basic words,
And then you start wondering if you're getting worse.
which usually isn't true. Language learning isn't a straight line.
Meaning?
Some days feel great. Some days feel average. Some days feel frustrating. That's normal.
So a bad day doesn't mean you're moving backward.
Not at all. Think about athletes. Even professional athletes have good days and bad days.
That's true. Nobody performs perfectly every single day.
Exactly. The mistake students make is attaching too much meaning to one practice session.
One difficult speaking session suddenly becomes, my English is terrible,
Right. When really, it might just be a tired day,
or a stressful day.
or simply a normal human day.
There's another fear I hear all the time. Students worry about the examiner.
That's a big one.
Some people imagine the examiner is sitting there looking for mistakes.
And that image creates unnecessary anxiety. The examiner isn't your enemy. They're not hoping you fail. They're simply assessing your English.
So students don't need to impress the examiner.
Exactly. They need to communicate with the examiner. Those are two very different goals.
Communication feels much more achievable.
Because it is. When students focus on connection instead of performance, their speaking often becomes more natural.
You know what I think is one of the most comforting ideas from today's episode?
Tell me.
The fact that freezing happens to many people. It's not some strange problem that only a few students experience.
Absolutely. In fact, almost every successful IELTS candidate has had moments where they forgot words, lost their train of thought, or felt nervous.
The difference is that they learned how to recover.
Exactly. They stopped seeing those moments as proof of failure.
They treated them as part of the process.
And that's a mindset shift that changes everything. Because once you stop fearing mistakes, speaking becomes much easier.
And once speaking becomes easier, confidence starts growing naturally.
That's right. Not overnight, not magically, but gradually.
Which honestly sounds much more realistic.
I agree. And now that we've explored the practical side and the mental side of freezing during IELTS speaking, there's one final thing left to do.
Bring everything together.
Exactly. In the last part of today's episode, we'll review the biggest lessons, give listeners a simple action plan they can start using immediately, answer an important question about speaking confidence, and give a preview of our next episode.
And if you've ever wondered why some students sound confident from the very first question of the speaking test, you'll definitely want to hear what's coming next.
You know, after everything we've discussed today, I think there's one lesson that stands above all the others.
Only one?
Well, maybe not only one, but it's definitely the lesson I hope listeners remember.
Now I'm curious.
Freezing during IELTS speaking doesn't mean you're bad at English.
I think a lot of people need to hear that.
Seriously, if you take only one thing from today's episode, let it be that. A moment of silence is not failure. Forgetting a word is not failure. Feeling nervous is not failure.
those things happen to almost everyone.
Exactly. The students who eventually achieve Band 7, Band 8, or even higher are not people who never feel nervous. They're people who learn how to continue even when they feel nervous.
That's such an important difference.
Think about it. If two students feel equally nervous, but one keeps speaking while the other gives up, their results will probably be very different.
So courage matters more than confidence sometimes?
Absolutely. People often wait to feel confident before taking action. But many times, confidence appears after you take action.
That's true in so many areas of life, not just IELTS.
Exactly. Now, let's make today's episode practical. Imagine someone listening right now and thinking, okay, this all makes sense, but what should I actually do tomorrow?
Good question.
Here's a simple challenge. For the next 7 days, answer one IELTS speaking question every day.
Just one?
Just one. No complicated schedule, no pressure, no 3-hour study session, just one question.
I like that because it feels achievable.
And there's one rule. Don't stop when you make a mistake.
That's the difficult part.
Exactly. If you forget a word, keep going. If your grammar isn't perfect, keep going. If you need a second to think, keep going.
The goal is communication, not perfection.
Exactly. At the end of the week, you'll probably notice something interesting.
What?
The questions won't feel as scary as they did on day 1.
Because your brain starts getting used to the situation.
Right. Fear often grows when we avoid something. But when we face it regularly, it usually becomes smaller.
That's a great way to think about speaking practice.
Another thing I'd like listeners to remember is this. Your IELTS score is important, but it does not define your value as a person.
I love that.
Sometimes students put so much pressure on themselves that they forget this is just one exam. An important exam, yes, but still just an exam.
And learning English is a much bigger journey.
Exactly. The communication skills you're building today can help you in university, at work, while traveling, and in conversations with people from around the world.
So even the preparation itself has value.
Absolutely. Nothing you learn is wasted.
Before we finish, I have a question for our listeners.
Let's hear it.
What usually makes you freeze during speaking? Is it nervousness? Running out of ideas? Fear of making mistakes? Or maybe feeling judged by others?
That's a great question. Share your answer in the comments because there's a good chance other students feel exactly the same way.
And sometimes it's comforting to realize you're not the only one struggling with something.
Absolutely.
We read your comments, and many future episodes are inspired by questions from our listeners.
So don't be shy. Join the conversation.
And if today's episode helped you, even a little, please support the channel by liking this video and subscribing to English Chat Studio.
It helps us continue creating free IELTS content for learners around the world.
Now, before we say goodbye, let's talk about what's coming next.
I'm excited for this one because it sounds simple, but I think many students struggle with it.
I completely agree. Our next episode is called How to Introduce Yourself Confidently in IELTS Speaking.
That first question in the test can feel surprisingly difficult.
Exactly. Many students start the exam feeling nervous, and those first few answers often set the tone for everything that follows.
So in the next episode, we'll discuss how to make a strong first impression, how to answer naturally, and how to sound confident without memorizing scripts.
We'll also share practical examples that you can adapt for your own speaking practice.
Definitely don't miss that one.
Until then, remember something simple.
You do not need perfect English to communicate effectively.
You do not need a perfect accent to get a good IELTS score.
And you do not need to be fearless before you start speaking.
Start where you are.
Practice consistently.
Accept mistakes.
Keep moving forward.
And trust the process.
Thank you for spending your time with us today.
Take care, keep practicing, and keep believing in yourself.
We'll see you in the next episode.
Right here on English Chat Studio.